Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or I should say good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're based. I'd like to thank the organizers for including me in the program today. They've asked me to prepare a recorded version, but I'll be coming on afterwards for discussion and questions and answers. My name is Scott Foster. I am Director of the Sustainable Energy Division here at the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, UNECE. We are one of the 5 regional commissions in the UN system. Our membership includes Canada, the United States. It includes Western, Central, and Eastern Europe, former Soviet Union, Israel, and Turkey. So you can see that we're quite a large region with 56 member states. Now, when I tell folks that I'm the Director of Sustainable Energy, the instant assumption and conclusion is that I'm working on energy efficiency and renewables almost exclusively. And while it is true that both of them are at the heart of the energy program here, that would be a more narrow view. We try to take a broader perspective of energy for sustainable development. And I would like to develop that with you a bit. Now that you've seen what I look like, I'm going to go and share my screen and go to a PowerPoint that I'd like to go through with you very briefly. There we go. So what we have in our set of concerns, on the first hand is climate change. Many countries, most countries, all countries are concerned about climate change. We are heading down a path towards between 4 and 6 degrees, let alone 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees. All of the wacky weather that we're seeing today is connected to a 1 degree increase in global average temperatures. So 4 to 6 clearly is a species existential threat, and nothing focuses the attention like scheduling your own execution. But on the other hand, we have the issues of development. Right now, we have a consumption trend in natural resources that we are using on average 11.9 tons per capita. You can see the distribution here between low income and high income. If we get to 2050 with 9 billion people, and we're starting to consume at that 11.9 figure or something a little higher, we're clearly going to need 7 planet Earths to deliver all of those natural resources. And last time I looked, we don't have 7 planet Earths. That is a critical issue. It is 10 past midnight on the climate agenda. It is 10 past midnight on the resource management agenda. And I would argue even more broadly that the whole development agenda is lagging, and we've got a lot of work to do to catch up. Energy is at the heart of the Sustainable Development Agenda, and it connects to all of the SDGs that are out there. I won't go through them in detail, but you can see that there is a direct connection. Now, I have structured my talk as a sonnet. I'd like to say that it rhymes with sonnet or alarm. As I've said, the alarms are sounding on both climate and on development. A sonnet because it's structured as 3 stanzas of 4 lines each. The stanzas are, the first one is a range of pathways, and talk through those. The second stanza is, if you will, Bartlett's famous quotation. I've got 4 quotes I'd like to explore with you. And the third one is a perimeter of perspectives. So let me dive into it, the pathways. The first upper left is, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. That's a quote from Yogi Berra, and he was describing how do you get to his house. And when you come to a fork in the road, you have a choice of right or left. When I'm talking about the fork in the road, I'm actually talking about that physical fork with the prongs. We actually think we have the luxury of choice, and that's not true. The point is that every technology has got its role to play in the future, and we can't go off and exclude them. Today, the energy mix comprises 80% of fossil, and that's been the case over the past. Despite all of the work we've been doing on renewables and energy efficiency and the rest of it, it's still 80%. So we have to recognize that by the time we get to 2050, the energy mix will include still 56% fossil, even under a scenario that meets the 2 degrees. So we can't exclude, in fact, we need to promote carbon capture and storage. We need to promote high efficiency, low emissions technology so that the fossil that is being used is used most efficiently with least environmental footprint. But you can't exclude nuclear power. You've got to promote energy efficiency. You've got to promote renewables, hydrogen. All of these technologies have got a role to play, and governments have got to put in place the investment framework conditions that allow them to play their role. If I can move over to the upper right, that footprint in the sand. A journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. The point here is that we cannot wait for the UN to go through the sausage factory of coming to an agreement and getting countries to actually do what they've committed to do. Right now, countries are not delivering on their nationally determined contributions, so there's a gap. And the NDCs that they've put together don't deliver 2 degrees. That's a second gap. And if we're going to close both of those gaps, we've got to start acting, and not necessarily the international level, but at the individual, the community, the company level, getting things to actually happen. And that is absolutely primordial if we're going to make it to our destination. Speaking of destinations, go to the bottom left, and you've got all roads leading to Rome. The point of this is that every country has got its own endowment of natural resources. It's got its own heritage, cultural, regulatory heritage that it brings to bear. There is not one pathway that applies to everybody. Every country is going to have to design its own approach. Having said that, we, the people in any country, should be able to expect that countries are working to improve the quality of life of citizens. We, the people, we should be able to expect that countries are going to act rationally environmentally, act rationally socially, act rationally environmentally. Those are all part of the governmental promise, if you will. We should be able to depend on mutually beneficial economic interdependence. That means building up a rules-based trading system, not tearing it down. We need to move in that direction where interconnectivity actually makes us more resilient and helps us achieve our objectives. Finally, there needs to be a common price on carbon so that there's consistent investment signals. And right now it's a bit of a fragmented hodgepodge. By carbon price, I don't necessarily mean tax. I don't necessarily mean a market. I'm not going to get into that debate, but there needs to be an effective price on carbon. If I can go down to the bottom right then, it's 2 paths diverged in a wood, and I took the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Kind of a perversion of a poem by Robert Frost, pretty close, I think. The idea here is that the energy industry has always been a commodity industry. I make more money by selling you more tons of coal and barrels of oil, cubic meters of gas. We need to reinvent energy as a service industry. I'm not consuming electricity or gas right now. I am consuming heating, lighting, and the rest. What needs to happen to the energy world is exactly what's been done with telecommunications, what's been done with the banking industry, to the airline industry, for better or worse. The point is that we need to think in terms of how are we going to deliver the quality of life, and my business model becomes one of delivering to you 18 degrees, 20 degrees in your home or in your office, making sure that you have access to the mobility that you require. It's then up to me to manage my costs with the technology, the investments, to deliver to you in a way that meets the climate and affordability objectives that are out there. So I'm going to stop with the pathways stanza and move to the next one with famous quotes. The first one upper left, as you may recognize, is Ronald Reagan in front of the Berlin Wall. And the quote is, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." The idea absolutely is we need to break down barriers. We need to stop considering that energy security equals energy independence. There needs to be a trading system that is providing the right signals, that is allowing access and exit, market competition with oversight to deliver desired outcomes. And if we can get effective interconnected markets, it'll be easier for everyone to achieve the desired objectives. Let me move over to the top right, which is JFK. Ask not what the UN can do for you, ask what you can do for the UN. Again, a slight perversion of the quote, if you'll forgive me. The United Nations doesn't do all of this work. We do depend on engagement with industry, with the private sector, to get the right standards and normative instruments in place, the best practices to share the knowledge out there. So it is absolutely essential to get the engagement of NGOs, of civil society, of all of the countries involved in this dialogue. The work that we do at UNECE absolutely depends on the strength and the robustness of the expert community that comes to our house and delivers, if you will, standards or delivers best practices. Those can then be shared around. And that's a process that will really accelerate both development and meeting the climate objective. Let me go down to the bottom left then. You may recognize Barack Obama. Yes, we can. When you look through the technologies that are out there and the know-how that's out there, it is absolutely the case that we can meet these objectives. We've got to get on with it. We've got to bring the right technologies to bear. We've got to bring the right policies into place, and we can do this. The alternative is actually unacceptable. It's this 4 to 6 degree existential threat. We've got to move. We've got to move quickly. So yes, we can. Yes, we have to. That's absolutely the case. Then we'll go down to the bottom right. And say, who's that guy? Well, that's Gordon Gekko from the movie Wall Street. And his thesis was that greed is good. And that's offensive to most people. The reality is you will find individuals acting in their own self-interest. You will find communities acting in their own self-interest. Nations, likewise. The challenge we face is how do we get alignment between those self-interests and what society requires? And the minute we can get that alignment, whether it's through a carbon price or some kind of a policy dialogue, but if we can get the alignment between self-interest on the one side and societal imperatives on the other, this path becomes an easier one to walk. So let me leave that stanza and go to my final stanza, which is the perimeter of perspectives. We've come through, I hope we're coming through, we will soon be through the pandemic. And you can see around the world how much is being imposed at the individual level. They're trying to deal with the challenges of avoiding getting sick. If they are sick, getting cured. There's the economic implosion that has happened. We haven't felt all of the repercussions of that yet. But we have really put the burden on the individual, and they're like Atlas struggling to bear all the weight of the world. That's one perspective, is the individual. Now, there are three other approaches that you can think about. The first one, upper right, is the industry-centric view of life. And it's where you're thinking about action. How am I going to deliver results the next quarter? How am I going to deliver a business plan? How am I going to show the world that I can deliver the returns? That's why I've used stock prices as my example. An alternative, if you will, from Da Vinci is the anthropocentric view, thinking about what mankind, what humankind requires. And that's very much what the 2030 agenda is about. How do we ensure that future generations have access to the resources that they need for sustainable development? And that's, I agree with that and endorse it and support it fully. But you then go down to the bottom right and you've got the sick planet. And I would say that this is a Gaia-centric perspective, where we need to recognize that we are humble servants of a system that's much bigger than us. And we need to think in terms of maintaining and supporting a balance of natural resources, natural environments. This species existential threat that I keep talking about, it's not just about humankind, it's about all species. And we've got to take care of our planet. Until we get planet B, we're stuck with planet A, and we've got to do a better job cleaning up the corners. So let me move forward. There are some things that we can do immediately and near term, and I think they are absolutely essential. The first one that I put on the screen is about high performance buildings. And between getting the buildings designed and built properly, putting effective systems in place, making sure that the energy that's needed for those systems is low carbon or no carbon, connecting through information communications technology, delivering services and mobility. The building sector is a quality of life opportunity, and we can actually make significant improvements very near term just by pursuing high performance buildings. We have an initiative underway on that at the ECE, but you'll find them in many places. We've got to get the building sector right. 40% of CO2 emissions come from the energy services that buildings require. And in terms of quality of life, it's where most people spend their lives is in buildings, either at home or off to work. And with the COVID, it's more often at home. Let me continue. The other is methane. There's debate about methane and what its impacts are, but concentrations of methane in the atmosphere have been rising. You can see on this graphic that the instantaneous equivalence to CO2 is 120. Then you can have a debate over which is the right factor to include. If we are able in the human sourced methane emissions to address them, that could have a very significant near-term benefit on the climate issue. Finally, we're talking about deep transformation of the energy system. I've mentioned it at the outset. We're talking about all technologies. We're talking about making things open so you have trading and engagement. You've got the right investment framework conditions. You've got the right access to the network, and you're supporting a multitude of different business models. Absolutely, we can get there, but the opportunities lie in developing an energy system that reflects the needs of the future. Energy services, getting the emissions down, bringing the new technologies in, and dealing with the environmental footprint of the existing system. So with that, I will stop. I will thank you very much for your attention. And if technology works, I'll be seeing you soon, probably in a different suit. Have a good day.